I'm going to start recording here. Hi, Vitor. I'm going to share my screen. Just 1 second. So here we have. I'm very excited to kick off our seminar series calendar for 2022. If you don't know me, I'm Fernando Redivo. I am the Marketing and Communications Director for the System Dynamics Society. One of my favorite projects in the society is the seminar series. We get to invite people from different backgrounds. We have like 40 people right now from all over the world. And it's so fun, to be here to learn together, share different experiences and ideas. And today we have Marta Cerrone from the Academy for Systems Change. And her topic today is Dancing with Systems, Moves for Turbulent Times. And I really hope that by the end of this seminar, you learn a little bit more of the Dana Meadows' work that she's gonna guide us through today. If you're not a member of the society yet, I just wanna remember of the benefits of being a member. You get free access to all society seminar series such as this one, and not only the upcoming ones, you also get access to all the recordings, the previous webinars from last year in 2020 as well. You get a discount on the registration fee on our upcoming conference in July. I'm going to talk about it in the next slide. You get full access to the Society Scientific Journal, the System Dynamics Review. You get exclusive prices on our bookshop. And if you're planning to learn more System Dynamics, you get access to a pool of mentors that can help you develop the skills, and also great discounts on our partners' online courses. So it's a great way to start the year, renewing your membership or joining us for the first time. And our conference this year is going to be hybrid. So we're going to meet in person in Frankfurt from 18 to 22, but you can also join us online. And registrations are not open yet. They're going to open by the end of the month. And you can learn more about the conference on systemdynamics.org/conference. Just a shout out that our growing list of 2022 sponsors, if you want to sponsor the society and help and support the society to expand the System Dynamics field, you can start a conversation with us, me or Rebecca, on office@systemdynamics.org. A reminder for you guys that we have an upcoming webinar with Billy Schoenberg, working with loops that matter, technique and tools for analyzing feedback loops. This is a more technical and hands-on webinar if you want to develop a specific skill of System Dynamics. So it's usual for us in the seminars that we use Poll Everywhere for questions, and today's no different. By the end of the webinar, the last 15 minutes, Marta will be answering some questions. So I'm going to give you some time, 30 seconds, to join us there on Poll Everywhere. There are different ways you can get there. The first one is scanning this QR code on your screen. You can also go to pollev.com/STSpolls877. And Mick, I forgot to ask you this. Can you put a link in the chat for the Poll Everywhere? If you have it easy hand or someone that is already there, can put a link on the chat for people to join the Q&A more easily. I repeat, you can join us on this, scanning the QR code on the screen, or going to pollev.com/STSpolls877. Let me see. Maybe I have one link here. If you guys, oh, thank you, Donald. Thank you so much. So the very first question I have for you guys is, where are you guys joining us from? As I told you at the beginning, I see already people in the chat saying that they're joining from London, Albuquerque, Australia. Here in the Poll Everywhere, I see some answer for San Francisco, Sweden, Switzerland, Israel, Italy. You see, it's very diverse. This is such a nice thing about the society, we get people from everywhere, which is fun. It's diversity always, it's a powerful tool, it makes us stronger. Ontario, thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much for joining us today. From US, of course, from the UK, Germany, what else? Ohio. Thank you guys for joining us today. I'm gonna go ahead and move on. Just alerting you that the Q&A is gonna be on during Marta's presentation. So you can, while she's presenting, you can send your questions and she's going to answer by the end of the webinar. Next slide. So small agenda for today. We're going to have about 45 minutes of Marta's presentation, a reflection on Dana Meadows' work, and then the last 15 minutes, we're having a Q&A. And don't worry if you don't get your question answered here live during the webinar. Marta told us that she can answer it by text, and we're going to have a blog post on our website, so you can look for your answer there too. So I'm happy to introduce you guys to Marta Cerrone. She's the co-director of the Academy for Systems Change. Thank you so much for being with us today, Marta. It's a pleasure to host you. That's all from my side. I'm going to be here giving you support. If you need anything, let me know, but you can kick off your presentation. Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. You can start sharing your screen if you want.
Sure, I'll do that in a moment. So thank you, Fernando, and thank you to the System Dynamics Society that I'm very fond of. And I also want to be expressing my gratitude to the Italian chapter of the society, because they were fundamental in bringing Donella Meadows' book, Thinking in Systems, in Italy just a couple of years ago. And I was part of that team, a little bit more distanced, but I'm just grateful to that chapter. And I know the society has many chapters around the world. So I am joining, as I mentioned in the chat, from New Hampshire, from Abenaki land that has never been seeded. Beautiful land. It's -14 Celsius here today, with lots of snow on the ground and ice. So it's always envy-inducing to see Fernando's background, of course. But I'm very happy to be here. I just want to reflect on the fact that you know, there's the field of systems thinking and systems change is broad. It brings a lot of strands, a lot of lineages. A lot of it dates back to some of the initial thought leaders, oftentimes from MIT, but there are other traditions of thinking systemically that might not even call themselves systems thinkers, but they are doing systems work nevertheless. And so I just want to acknowledge that broad, family that we are a part of. And so for me, it's a special honor to be here in this community. And with COVID not going that much anywhere at this time, it feels like I'm just kind of stepping into a different community in a different world for a moment. And it feels just generative to be at that intersection. A friend of mine who is First Nation Native Canadian, always Melanie Goodchild, who is also on our faculty at the Academy of Systems Change, talks about the sacred place between knowledge systems, so that we honor each other's knowledge system, and a lot can happen in the in-between. So I feel a little bit in the in-between here. And with that, I'm going to start sharing the screen here. Let's see. Okay, let me do that. I'm just going to go in presentation mode. Let's see, here we are. So many of you are probably familiar with the Dancing with Systems essay. And if you're not, you can check it out on our website, donellameadows.org. It's one of the places where a lot of the cultivation of Donella Meadows' work happens. And Dancing with Systems is one such seminal piece of her work, that it was really a reflection around how we intervene in systems, and brings the awareness and the mirror to the system intervener, if you will. And so Donella Meadows, I'll jump around a little bit. I just want to say there's going to be more of a conversation in a way, like yeah, it's not going to be necessarily, 1, 2, 3, 4, that kind of things, but it's going to be a little bit more fluid. And I just want to mention that Donella Meadows has been not only a great inspiration for myself and for many of us in the field, And one of the things that I appreciate in her work really is that once in a while she would make these distillations of what she had learned in the previous years or through the previous experiences of her work and life. And so Dancing with Systems is one crystallization and of that. So because we can't control systems, as Donella Meadows said, I used to say, we can dance with them. So that's why there is kind of a dance orientation in the moves. And I personally am very interested in movement as a dancer myself, and ways that the body can actually contribute to teaching in the work of systems awareness and systems change. At the Academy for Systems Change that I'm the co-director of, we support communities of systems learning, mostly in North America, but also internationally. We definitely build on the work of Donella Meadows, who has been one of our founders. And we are legally the same entity that Donella Meadows founded in 1996. And we just do business with a different name, Academy for Systems Change. And so when we talk about systems thinking, we also include systems being and systems doing. And we bring this dimension of the awareness that, you know, is awareness around the intervener in a system is really at the nexus between self-transformation and systems transformation. And to quote again my colleague and friend Melanie Goodchild, we talked a lot about systems healing, and so there's a lot of healing and repairing that needs to happen in our systems that have been systematically producing outcomes that nobody wants. And with that, I just wanted to bring us to this space, kind of arrive in this space, and maybe bring us a little bit more in connection with our body. We're going to take just one moment to come into this space with the awareness that there's a number of us here. I see 73 participants. We are coming from all different walks of life, different parts of the world. Who knows what's happening in your homeland right now with COVID and beyond. So when we are all brought together by an interest in systems, and whenever we seek systemic change, we're seeking it because there's great pain. So whenever systems change is needed, whenever it's time for systems change, is also a time of great suffering. So I just want to acknowledge the great suffering, and at the same time hold the beautiful possibility that we have here as a community to think together, to be stimulated together, and to connect with the loving energy of Donella Meadows. And so here in this image, before we get to the moment of silence, is Cobb Hill. I don't know how many of you know that Donella Meadows, one of her actualized dreams, actualized visions, was an intentional community in rural Vermont. And she barely got to see the beginnings of this community because she died prematurely in 2001. But she had all the plans, all the community lined up. People moved from different parts of the US to come live her dream, actualized dream, which included a research center, the Sustainability Institute, that's how she called it, an intentional community that they would demonstrate how to live on the land sustainably, a finite piece of land with a finite number of houses and a finite number of cows. She was really interested in the experiment of actually having a living, real farm, a dairy farm, which is distinctive of a lot of the work, the farm work that happens in Vermont, have it as part of this three-dimensional vision to really bring it to reality and kind of simulating, but in real life, a microsystem of the whole, which brings a lot of implications. And I could spend a whole session about how that experiment has worked and is working. And that's maybe a conversation for another time. But anyway, with that, grounding ourselves in this beautiful actualized vision that shows us that things are possible, that change is possible. and dreams are possible, but at the same time kind of holding the difficulty of this moment. And so I invite you to connect to your body, and if it helps to close your eyes and put a hand on your belly, you can definitely do that. Thank you for that. I hope you're personally healthy, in a good space of heart and mind, and so are your family members in your community. So I always love to see this picture. It's just Dina Meadows at her best. And before we launch into her world that many of you might be familiar with or not, but regardless, she's here smiling at us. And I wanted to introduce her using her own words. And that's something that I should say happens a lot. She wrote so much about what she was doing, and she considered herself an experiment of life and learning. And so she put herself in constant connection and sharing, because she was her own living experiment of how to live humanly in a world of complex systems. So that's why you'll find a lot from her. And I always choose to respect her voice because it's so powerful. And so here she is, an ex-biophysicist, opinionated columnist, perpetual fundraiser, fanatic gardener, opera lover, baker, farmer, teacher, and global gadfly, who lives on a sheep farm and rides on a Macintosh computer with a Buddha sitting on top of it, a cat on her lap, and a dog at her feet. So that places her, I should say that before founding Cobb Hill in the year 2000, as I said, before she died, she had already experimented with community living in another farm. And so when she mentions a farm, that's the Foundation Farm in New Hampshire, where she started experimenting with this community. And maybe some of you even went to that farm. It'd be interesting to know. So the work of Donella Meadows is vast, as you know, and it's been helpful for me through the years to use a frame to navigate Donella Meadows' work, a frame that, by the way, that Donella Meadows, I'm sorry, I sometimes call my institute the Donella Meadows Institute, because that's actually what we used to be called, and that's what I used to direct, but we are, of course, Academy for Systems Change. So at the Academy, we often use the frame of creative tension as a tool to really understanding how systems change happens. And so I'll talk a little bit about the frame, which is useful in your personal life and in your change efforts. But it also is useful to understand how Donella Meadows was orienting to her work. So just a couple of minutes on the frame. Whenever we are trying to bring something into the world that didn't exist before, or change something that exists, there is a couple of dimensions. And normally I do this presentation of the frame in an interactive way. So I'm not used to actually present it like this, but just bear with me for a moment, I'll try. So whenever you think of a change effort or something that creatively you want to bring into the world, you start from what? You start not certainly with current reality, unless you want to really understand what you want to change, but normally what really motivates you and me is a vision of something different or something new that you want to bring about. And so that's kind of a setting a little bit the propulsion. Oftentimes, of course, we have to really be thinking about where we're starting from. And so in reality, systems change, or the propulsion to change, really happens from perceiving, sometimes in very physical ways, the gap between current reality and vision. I actually don't see myself so, but if we have current reality is here and vision is here, there's inevitably a tension, a gap, you know, a potential for changing things that nevertheless really points to what is missing, what is not being delivered by the current system. And that tension, you know, can be used as a force of change. It can also be something that we experience as pain. And so while there is a potential for change there and creativity, it also oftentimes is a place of pain. As an example, I was meeting with a group that I'm collaborating with on homelessness in Italy. And of course, there's a constant navigation of wanting to respond to the emergency of homelessness, especially exacerbated by COVID, and respond in a certain manner, but at the same time wanting to tend to a bigger vision. And oftentimes this work is very hard to do, to tending to both. And the qualities for looking at current reality are very interesting. And Donella Meadows is someone who I think was really able to develop the tools for looking at current reality with honesty. Because oftentimes looking at current reality is actually very difficult and involves, inconvenient truths, uncovering inconvenient truths. And one thing I just want to mention, a quote that is I have here on the right of the screen, and here is Donella talking, and she says, "I keep my feet firmly on the ground of present reality, but my eyes on a vision for a better world." And so I think a lot of the work that she's done on modeling, and just thinking about, the modeling that she did for Limits to Growth, and just a reminder that we are 50 years after the publication of Limits to Growth. So we've been celebrating and honoring that type of work. This year we'll be doing a lot of work on that for the 50th year anniversary of Limits to Growth. And so there's been I can imagine that with the Systems Dynamics Society, a lot of the folks in the community do a lot of diagnostic analytical work. It is very helpful, all the work on modeling or the work of uncovering archetypes, systems archetypes, as good diagnostic understanding, zooming out and in to understand current reality. What I think is very special in the work of Donella Meadows is this desire to tend to the vision part as well, and maintaining that sense of optimism. In some of her reflections on Limits to Growth, she has seen the possible unfolding of a very difficult future for humanity in exponential growth mode on a finite planet. And yet she talks about how she was able to maintain optimism in the face of that, because there was a difference for her between recognizing and analyzing and reflecting on current reality and the limitless potential to actually tap into the power of choices or making choices. So Limits to Growth and a lot of her work is about awareness and mapping current reality for choices, for making better choices. And so one thing I want to share here, and then we get into the other part of the presentation on insights, is really this beautiful quote about start with the vision, be open to any path by which the vision will be realized, be patient and persistent, be true to the vision, and things will work out. And that's why I put this scribble here, that change actually is complex and sometimes is one step forward and three backward, and sometimes is going into rabbit holes and sometimes coming out, and is, as you all know, this work is complex. But one thing that was interesting to me is kind of a spiritual dimension of, once you have your vision, you're very clear, you're very grounded in the vision, just let it go in the world. that intention and that vision, and be open to any paths for that to actually manifest, which is something that speaks to letting go of control of the pathway of the plan. Not necessarily applicable to all dimensions, but I just want to mention this kind of more spiritual reading of Donella Meadows' work, because maybe if we focus on the modeling side of her work, we might miss out on this other side, which is totally integrated in her way of being and working. I'm just going to move to the next slide, if I can do that. Yes, so about that gap that I was talking about between current reality and vision, one of the beautiful quotes I wanted to share here is exactly about the pain in between. So if we could strengthen ourselves to endure the pain of the enormous gap between the world we know and the world we profoundly long for, I believe that it's only by admitting, permitting, and carrying that pain that we can gradually move our world away from its present suffering and unsustainability and toward our deepest values and our dearest vision. And this is coming from the Dear Folks letter. It's a series of letters. It's almost like a blog that was happening monthly for many, many years. I can't remember how many years. And so I cannot follow the chat, but I think that Fernando is, or someone else is putting maybe the links to these resources. And so when we look at using that frame that I mentioned of looking at current reality, vision, and the tension in between, that can be used creatively if we are not overwhelmed by it. And by the way, it could be a whole another conversation, entire hour dedicated to that frame. But for simplicity, one way to really look at current reality that I think is very useful in the work of Donella Meadows is her reflection and distillation on leverage points, which probably most of you know. And so leverage points being places of power in a system. And when I use the word power in thinking about Donella Meadows' work, we just have to be a little bit nuanced, because when Donella Meadows was talking about power, yes, she might have also talked about, kind of power in a hierarchical system. And yet the word power has to do with functional power to change a system. So to my understanding, Donella Meadows did not espouse a power analysis frame, like, for example, a feminist frame or a Marxist frame, but rather she really looked at the system and the function of the system, and therefore finding places of power in there. We've seen that several traditions of thinking have also used as a way to really reflect on and analyze power structures in our current society. I hear some interesting sounds. I don't know where they're coming from. They're not disturbing to me, but I just want to bring it out if other people feel that it's a little distracting. So if you have read Leverage Points, you know that among the top levers for change is definitely the purpose of a system. And so I just want to read this quote from Donella Meadows and share a few reflections. A change in purpose changes a system profoundly, even if every element and interconnection remains the same. And this is a quote both in an essay that we have available for free on our website, but also part of the book Thinking in Systems. And I just wanted to reflect on the purpose of a system. And I think what I find specifically very valuable here is this difference between the stated goal and the actual goal of a system. And I think Donella has been really the only person I know who really pointed out that distinction. And that we could also see as a difference between the intended purpose of a system and the impact that that system is having. on people. And so being aware of this difference when questions become legitimate, especially at the time of so much disruption in our systems, that actually gives us the potential to rethink and redesign and reframe entire systems. So then the question can become, what does it look and what does it feel to intentionally design a system so that it actually does deliver the stated goal, the wanted goal. And so, because I work with a lot of change makers, oftentimes some of the conversations would start with a question, what are you designing for? What are you centering, or who are you centering through your work? Or who is the current system being in service of? Another amazing thinker whose work I really respect is David Peter Stroh, who wrote Systems Thinking for Social Change. And he always talks about, before changing anything, in fact, and as part of looking at current reality, just asking the question of who has invested interest in the status quo. In some cases, there might be also things that are worth conserving, and not necessarily bad ones, or outcomes that are, that are actually serving some part of the population that is, that is deemed really crucial for finding the solutions of the future. So I just don't want to use kind of a binary logic here, but just reflecting on who and what the system is in service of right now. The importance of a purpose or alignment behind a purpose that everybody wants is really hard to underestimate. I just recently completed an experience of working with a benefit corporation, and you might have benefit corporations in your country, and these are companies that in their DNA have a triple bottom line, let's call it, a set of purposes, meaning that they can tend to the financial bottom line, but they also have a mandate to really take care of a social and environmental mission, and a social justice mission in particular. And to me, it's been just amazing to feel how in a corporate setting, employees were energized by seeing their individual perceived purposes aligned with the purposes of the organization that they were a part of. And so this idea of the microcosm, that if you are able to create, even in your everyday life, the conditions and the feelings that align with your deeper values and your deeper visions, and you're able to actually work in a context that allows that deeper sentiment and that deeper aspiration to manifest, is really that place of multiple integrated reinforcing feedback loops that are very beneficial. And I just felt it in the air, felt it in the pride and the dignity of people. And I also know the experience of when that is not the case. And this could be a completely another conversation. So I'm already lining up with the third one conversation that we could have about what it means to be working in an organization that is aligned with your personal visions and when it's not. And because we have done a lot of internal work at the Academy to realign with our deeper, honest sense of direction, I have learned a lot in that process of supporting an entire community through a healing and transformation journey within an organization and a community. I don't know how we're doing on time, but 11:35 my time. So going back to a second insight or move in the dance of change is really also taken from Leverage Points, and it's about paradigms. And in that leverage point number one, that creates so much conversation each time I bring it up. And it's a little bit cryptic, a little bit mysterious, a little bit spiritual. So just this idea that there is yet one leverage point that is even higher than changing a paradigm, that is to keep oneself unattached in the arena of paradigms, to stay flexible, to realize that no paradigms is true, that everyone, including the one that sweetly shapes your own worldview, is a tremendously limited understanding of an immense and amazing universe that is far beyond human comprehension. And so this idea of knowing that paradigms are the mindsets out of which the system arises, and just think about all the unspoken social norms that you, me, we are a part of every single day, and what is valid and what is not in a particular society or environment. I changed a few employers, and sometimes I recognize, a few months after I joined, I'm in the job, that there were unspoken norms or unspoken etiquettes that I was not familiar of, that they were part of the culture of the organization. And it took me some time to actually notice and spell out. And so oftentimes the work of systems change is to make the invisible visible. And I think Donella Meadows has done and continues to do through her words an amazing work at kind of unpacking that invisible. And so I'm just thinking about the power of stepping back from even one's own belief systems, which is a very hard thing to do when you think that cultures are probably for 90% submerged, and you have to rely on that 10% that is visible to actually start unpacking the invisible. The paradigms are also an emotional investment because they define one's world and oneself. So Donella Meadows was aware of the identity that is attached to that. And her suggestion that, becoming aware of one's own paradigms actually can bring radical empowerment and liberation. And there's not always space for that kind of conversation. And so where do you have these conversations? Sometimes it's the urgency of resolving or addressing some very difficult situations on the ground. And the vocabulary and the shared experiences and the trust that this type of conversation actually requires. That's why at the Academy for Systems Change, we are often thinking really intentionally about the spaces for transformation, for having those conversations that actually can shift the way we orient and show up in the world. And so that's another reminder from the work of Donella Meadows of looking at those intangibles. Let's see. There's together with looking at the tools for having a deeper insight into current reality. As you know, and as you can imagine, Donella Meadows has done tremendous work on modeling, and I talked about the limits to growth modeling. A very important insight from the modeling work came that, imagine this, 1972, this book comes out that actually kind of casts a future for humanity that is very difficult, about a possible uncontrollable how do you call it? So basically it's not a collapse, but it's kind of a decrease, an uncontrollable decline. That's what the word that I was looking for, in population and economic output if things don't change. So there was a kind of a harsh reality that the model was putting forward. And again, this would require another conversation. This would be the fourth conversation that we could have. What is interesting to me is that the theme of limits to growth that really showed some harsh truths through modeling, and you probably encounter this in your work too, and I'd be very curious to know about this. sometimes you do modeling with stakeholders and you present certain things that really have a hard time getting through, or decision makers and politicians actually refuse to even look. That continues to be the case for a lot of my colleagues who are active systems modelers. And so that was happening to Donella Meadows and the team of Limits to Growth as well. After 3 books and over 3 decades, basically repeating the same thing, they were coming to the conclusion that, you know, showing the data and showing the rational analysis of current reality wasn't enough. And so they were scientists, and they were very timid in using words like visioning, networking, truth-telling, and loving, which are tools that they identified as things that are essential to really intervene in systems that resist their own transformation. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit about visioning, just making sure that I'll just be quick, maybe a couple of minutes till we have some time for questions. So vision without action is useless, but action without vision is directionless and feeble. Vision is absolutely necessary to guide and motivate. More than that, vision, when widely shared and firmly kept inside, does bring into being new systems. So there's a lot of work that Donella Meadows did later on when she started recognizing that with the softer, so-called softer tools or people-to-people tools that were really necessary to model the transition to a different world that everybody desires for themselves, but that the systems at the moment are not designed to deliver. You know, she did a lot of work on that. And there's actually a beautiful resource that, if you have not seen, is it's called Envisioning a Sustainable World. And Donella Meadows shares like a guided visioning practice at a conference that happened in 1992 in Costa Rica at the conference of the Ecological Economic Society. And maybe that's another link that we can share. And if it's not readily available, I'll share it later. Yeah, just very quickly, a vision as an image of a desired future, and Donella stresses this over and over. It's what I really want, what we really want, not what I settle for, or what we settle for. And so something to come back to. And then lastly, when Donella Meadows speaks about truth telling, this is something that was really true and grounded in her work from the beginning, that you can drive a system crazy by muddying its information streams, and you can make a system work better with surprising ease if you can give it more timely, more accurate, more complete information. So information flows, and who has information or access to, who controls information. That's something that really was alive for Donella Meadows. Going back to that initial frame that I shared of current reality and vision, and the creative tension in between, a commitment to truth is a commitment to honoring complexity. And we as systems people, you know, we're oftentimes put in a hard spot because of lack of shared language and continued use of simplifying language in the media and beyond. It's very hard for us to be holders of complexity and honoring it in a way that kind of doesn't dump things down, if you will, in whatever work we're doing. And so, of course, the modeling the modeling tool is essential to that, and yet it's very you know, it's only a small slice of people who can really delve into that level of depth. So I'm always curious about how to tell stories of complexity that don't have necessarily that level of intricacy, technical intricacy. On truth, just to close here, just think about what's happening in your own country. I know that Canada has gone through a truth and reconciliation process intentionally, and the work is not done. As we know, there's a lot happening in Canada, especially with the discovery of the graves of children in residential schools, which has opened a lot of wounds and a lot of traumas in the Indigenous community. And so even for a culture, even for a nation that has had an intentional desire to look at truth and past truth and trauma, that is really hard work, And I'm living in a country now in the US that has not taken that path of looking at truth on the way to reconciliation. So when we look at truth telling, there's the truth that keeps systems agile and moving and hopefully delivering the outcomes that we want them to deliver, but it's also that deeper sort of historical ancestral level of truth that the systems work calls us to do. I just want to, on a personal level, what that looks like, I just love this duality between truth and love. How can you hold one another, or can we hold each other in kindness, that's the love, and in rigor. And this is happening more and more in circles of transformational change that I'm a part of, especially around the dynamics of systemic oppression and racism. And so it's like this, spaces of change where culture is set with anything we do, from a meeting, from coming together here today, we set a certain culture. From your supper with your family, you set a certain culture. And so how do you hold each other in truth and love and kindness and rigor in these difficult times? And I think I'll stop here with some resources for you that, and as I said, the slides will be shared. So all of this is available, and I remain available for questions beyond the time that we have right now. And thank you all. And I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Marta. Yeah, just reinforcing here that the slides and recording, they will be available in our website tomorrow or up to 2 days. You receive your email with resources. I'll be sending them. Now we do have some questions, Marta. We have about 12 minutes. I think it's enough time to get some of those questions answered. Let me just share my screen here. I'll help you guide this Q&A. So we do have here about 6 or 7 questions. We can start with the most upvoted ones from Joe, I think, and he's asking, having ideology seems to be a big part of the world we live in, but to be an effective systems thinker, do we need to lose ideology to be open to all kinds of visions and solutions?
That is interesting.
As you were talking about paradigms, I kind of started to equate paradigms to ideology.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, this is a space for provocations, like in a good way, like kind of testing a little bit, even the words. When I think of ideology, I think of a belief that is kind of actively defended and actively defining of an identity. And so to me, it lacks the curiosity. I think, there's a difference between ideology and values. And so for me, if the conversation can actually move from the ideology, therefore that kind of strongly held and defended and defining belief. So if you can move from that conversation to the conversation of values, I think that's a different conversation. And maybe from there, the visions might be actually more closer than we think. The problem is this kind of language sometimes that separates at the onset, and then it becomes a lot of it defensive type of conversation or work that doesn't really get to the root of what we might actually share. There's been a lot of work that Dana Lamedes did on really eliciting what people wanted for themselves in their community. And across the spectrum, people typically want the same things. And so if we can get to that type of conversation, having feeling, a sense of dignity, belonging, and safety, and material needs met. And I mean, there's a lot there, but I really appreciate that question because it's definitely relevant.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marta. Let's move on to the next one then. This one I just pasted here from Michael. He's asking what happens if we lack a solid vision, which is sometimes assumed is the case regarding sustainability.
Solid vision. Yeah, it's interesting because there's something about, I was just listening yesterday to the new Ministry for the Energy and Environment in Germany, and he was expressing his vision of a sustainable future in Germany. And it was interesting how it was really like a plan. And so it was kind of almost, he was almost presenting a national plan to reach certain emission goals, which really had encompassing consequences across the economy and the way of living of people and culture, etc. And so maybe I wonder whether it's helpful to make a distinction between what might be a shared plan that is actually maybe the expression of multiple ways of believing and ways of knowing that contribute to that plan versus a vision. And a vision doesn't have to be unique and one for all, right? Sometimes I feel it's a little risky to want the vision or the solid vision, but there might be things, we know what things we all need. And so starting from definitely finding ways to achieve at least those very things, I think it's a starting point. But I wonder whether Michael had more to add to this, because it's hard to capture a question in a few lines.
I can briefly express my intention of my question, if that is fine with you. I just had the feeling we see so many negative news about potential future, which is for me not the vision. So maybe my wording saying a solid vision is misleading. I'm not asking for a plan, but I'm asking for a desired vision is maybe a better term then. Instead of just avoiding things, so doing less bad. I'm looking for what could be we are designing for. I like a little bit Ehrenfeld and designing for sustainability, but quite often I don't see that. Particularly in environmental discussions, we try to save what we have and try to close the gap while we are not opening up to possibilities and acknowledge that change is inevitable.
Yeah, thank you for that, Michael, because I think that speaks to that creative potential that actually is embedded in visioning. And it goes back to what Dana Lamedes was talking about. It's like, in fact, there's a story in which Dana Lamedes was at international summit on hunger and ending hunger in the world. And everybody, like you said, Michael, or Michael maybe, because I don't know, everybody was focused on making, doing more of the type of work that they were doing in kind of terms of reducing the problem. But nobody could imagine what a world without hunger looked like, to the point that Dana Lamedes actually disrupted the meeting and basically asked that question: what does a world without hunger look like? And it took a whole day to actually get to the question, because people were so reluctant, because it felt so loosey-goosey, because there was so much pain embedded in envisioning something different, that people had lost their imaginative power. And so if you find yourself in such a place of despair or remediation only without creativity, there is the power of disrupting a conversation and actually setting aside for a moment the agenda and maybe creating and inviting that energy of visioning.
Thanks, Marta. Thanks, Michael. I think we have maybe time for another 2 questions. So Elizabeth is asking, do you have any tips for mentally dealing with complexity when you are a tiny part of a huge system? For example, I'm one working in a corporation of thousands, and it can feel overwhelming to affect change.
Oh gosh, this is true for you. And what is the name of the person?
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth. Yeah, I think that is really true for all of us, because I mean, in your case is an example of you are part of a bigger corporation, but we are all part of these larger systems that we are trying to change and shift in some ways. And so I think sometimes I'll just be personal in this case, because I don't have solutions that I can generalize, but what keeps me grounded and oriented in complexity is that I personally try to be closer to the arts that embed a form of beauty. And it's another way of looking at complexity. I think art honors complexity without necessarily words, or sometimes is words. And so one thing I also do is writing. I do creative fiction. And so I try to bring that complexity in my writing. So one question is, how do you show up as an individual as part of these overwhelming systems? And part of it is kind of creating that microcosm in yourself, and a way to stay true to the complexity. That could be through the arts, could be within your company or within my organization, is creating conversations with people who feel aligned. So one of Danella's suggestions for how the systems change is to really look for those islands where the new system or there is emergence of the new kind of islands of an emerging future. And that's also language from Otto Scharmer. Where is it already happening? Where is it emerging? And can I be part of those conversations? So it's kind of that resilient structure. And at the same time, kind of once you have a little nugget or a little group of people, either at work or outside of work, that you can really have those conversations and that support, that's a place of mutual accountability, where it's like, okay, well, I'm going to show up in a certain way or follow this particular thread in the system that I have control or influence it on. You don't need to be the CEO of a company to influence a company. Maybe you can take a little thread. If you have influence on, I don't know, procurement or HR or whatever it is, there are ways to even in our little threads to really embody what really matters to us. And yes, it is a lot that we're holding.
Thank you, Marta. I'll let you choose one last question, as I took some time from you at the beginning. So we do have a few ones, and maybe, do you want to answer any of those ones?
I just like this question. Do natural systems have goals, or do only
Go ahead.
Or do only artificial systems have goals? This is such a beautiful and loaded question that makes me laugh, because I'm an ecologist by training, so I studied forests and how forests communicate, and yeah, like the parts of the system communicate with one another. But anyway, I don't know. I think it's a philosophical question, and it would be wonderful to have that conversation as a group. But I just feel that the goal is maintaining the richness and the diversity of life. And yeah, I don't want to be reading too much into this, but I normally when I introduce systems for the first time in groups, I don't talk about goals in nature. I don't have a deterministic view of nature. But I'd be curious, where does nature tend to? Is it, and there's so many theories, from the theory of climax in forest, and stability, and yeah, maybe the important thing to do in systems work is also not expecting a final definite answer or a final neat ending of things. And I feel that's one of such cases where it's like big, beautiful mystery.
Thank you, Marta. Unfortunately, we don't have time to answer all the questions. I see some comments in the chat, Marta, thanking you for your presentation and appreciating the seminar. So if you wanna maybe just, I'll just quickly read some comments here. Elizabeth saying that's a great answer. I love how you keep mentioning conversations. That seems important, talking about things across a network of people and see where the thread goes and impact it can have. And more people are thanking you for your presentation and words here and insights today. I just have one final slide to present here. Is just asking for your feedback on this seminar. You receive a link on your email to give us feedback. So it's really important. We really appreciate and you help us improve with your feedback. Thank you so much. Marta, do you have any final words for our audience today?
Yeah, I have a lot of gratitude. Thank you for being with me in this journey. And I just, I'd be curious to know more about each of you. And it's incredible that we don't have that opportunity, but yeah, so be well, take care. Thank you, Fernando. Thank you, System Dynamics Society. You're just awesome. So thank you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Marta. Thank you, everyone. I'll see you soon on the upcoming webinar on the 26th.
Wonderful.
Bye-bye.
Bye.